Hello there. How are you today? My name is Damon McMurdo. Today I'm here to teach you about least common denominator, or also known as LCD. You may also see it written as least common multiple, because that's basically what you're doing when you're finding the least common denominator. Now, as you know, we need the least common denominator when we're adding or subtracting fractions, because we cannot add or subtract fractions unless they have the same denominator. So let's first just find common denominators. So I'm going to take two fractions. I'm going to take the fractions 1/4 and 3/6. And I'm going to find the least common denominator of those two fractions. So first, what I do is identify my denominators. My denominators are the numbers on the bottom. That tells us how many total parts there are in whatever we're talking about. The total number of students, the total pints of ice cream, the total number of cookies. This tells us how many total it is. The numerator tells us how many parts of that total we have. So we might have 1 out of 4 kids, or 1 out of 4 dentists think that Crest is the best toothpaste. Something like that. Okay? So we take our two denominators, which in this case are 4 and 6. And we're going to find the least common multiple of those two denominators, or least common denominator. And what you're doing is you're basically making a multiplication chart similar to the one you have in your journal, or similar to the one that you have on the wall, or similar to the one that you have in your brain. Because I know you sleep thinking about multiplication. If not, you should. So let's take our two numbers, our two denominators, which, as I said, are 4 and 6. And what I can do is I can just take a multiplication chart and make one of just these numbers. So if I go times 1 there, well, obviously 4 times 1 is 4, and 6 times 1 is 6. If I go times 2, 4 times 2 is 8, and 6 times 2 is 12. And I go, now I don't have anything the same. I have a 4 and an 8 here, I have a 6 and a 12 here. So I must keep going until I find the same number that's in both sections. So then I have to multiply by 3. 4 times 3 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. But bingo, look at what we have. We have the number 12 is a multiple of 6, and 12 is a multiple of 4. Now, as you know, we could go on forever and ever 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 and find a whole bunch of multiples of 4 and 12 that are common. We don't need to do that. Once you find the first one, and you'll notice, since it's called least common denominator, least common multiple, you want to find the first one. Once we found the first one, we don't want to keep going because it's ridiculous to keep finding more and more because you can't find the greatest one. So now we have our two fractions, 1/4 and 3/6. Okay, so we take our two fractions and we want to change them so that they have the common denominator of 12, because we can't compare fractions, we can't add fractions, we can't subtract fractions unless they have the same exact denominator. But we're not going to change the value. We're going to make both of these fractions equivalent. So 1/4 is equivalent to something over 12. 3/6 is equivalent to something over 12. And as we know, because I've said it 100 times, you can multiply or divide any number by 1 and you're not changing the value. 7 times 1 is 7. 18 times 1 is 18. 2/3 times 1 is 2/3. But we're going to change the way it's written. Just like $1 and 10 dimes are worth the same amount, they're just different. You took your $1 and divided it by 10, and you get 1, or you get 10 dimes, but it's the same value. So then I have to ask myself, 4 times what equals 12? So basically we're using the algebraic expression 4 times a equals 12, and we have to figure out what a equals. Well, because we know our multiplication tables, 4 times 3 equals 12. So I have to multiply 4 by 3 to get 12, which means I need to multiply 1 by 3 to get 3. And notice, 1/4 and 3/12, exactly the same. If I gave you a test that had 4 questions, you only got one of them right, you were going to get a 25%, same value. If I gave you a test that had 12 questions and you got 3 of them right, you're going to get 25%. Same value, exactly the same. So I'm not changing the value of the fraction, I'm just changing how it's written. Same thing with 3/6. As long as that's a crazy looking one. As long as I multiply by a fraction that equals 1, then we're going to be all good in this case. So we have to figure out what do we multiply by 6 to get 12. So we're saying 6 times what equals 12. Okay? We know 6 times 2 equals 12. We need to multiply this fraction by 1, so 2 over 2 equals 1. And then we multiply straight across. When you multiply fractions, you multiply straight across. 3 times 2 is 6. So now we have 3/12 and 6/12. So if I had to say which one of these two fractions is bigger, I could say that the one that is equal to 6/12 is bigger, and that's 3/6. So 3/6 is bigger. Okay, if I wanted to add them together, I could add them together because they have the same denominator. So once you have the same denominator, you can compare the fractions. But what if we have 3 fractions? Well, let's look at that. And having 3 fractions doesn't change what we do. So if we have the fractions, 3/8, 1/16, and let's say 2/4. And we need to change them so that they all have a common denominator. We need to see which one's bigger. We need to see which one's smaller. We need to add them together. Whatever the case is, we need to change them so that they have the same denominator. So we take our 3 denominators, which are 8, 16, and 4. And we're basically making a multiplication table for 8, 16, and 4. Now 16's big. I don't know my 16's times table, but if you watch, the reason I picked 16 is going to be obvious here. If I multiply 8 times 2, I'm going to get 16 there. So now I have 16 in both rows. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get 16 in my 4 row. If 16 is a multiple of 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. And 4 times 4 is 16. Every set of numbers is going to have a common multiple. Every set. Now the common multiple may be way down there. Or it may be close, like this. But every set of numbers will have a common multiple. Okay, and it's not going to be 1. Now I know that 16 is my common denominator. So if I want to change these so they're over 16, it's easy as done as that. You do just like we did before. We want to multiply by a fraction that equals 1. And as long as we're multiplying by a fraction that equals 1, we're not changing the value. Again, we're changing how it's written. We're not changing the value. Then I just have to go 8 times what is 16? Well, if I look over here, 8 times 2 is 16. So I multiply by 2 over 2. Multiply by straight across, 3 times 2 is 6. So 3/8 and 6/16 are the same value. What times 16 is 16? Well, if I look here, 16 times 1 is 16. And again, I'm multiplying by 1, so that doesn't change the value. Sorry, 1 times 1 is 1. What do I multiply by 4 to get 16? If I look here, 4 times 4 is 16. So I multiply this by 4/4. And I'll multiply straight across. 2 times 4 is 8. So now I know 3/8 is equivalent to 6/16, same value. 1/16 obviously equivalent to 1/16. And 2/4 is equivalent to 8/16. So I could add them if I wanted to. I could compare them, and I would see that since 8/16 is my biggest one over here, 2/4 is the greatest fraction I have here. If it said put them in order from greatest to least, I'd know that it goes 2/4, and then 6/16 is 3/8, and then the smallest one would be 1/16. So one more example, and I got to erase with my hand because I was too lazy to go over it. In fact, just hold for just a second. Don't go anywhere! I'm coming back! Got my eraser. You're not here to fire me, are you? No? Good, thank you. All right, now we're going to do an activity that calls for you to find the least common multiple. Very easy activity, shouldn't take you very long, but I'm going to make you show your work. So least common multiple is the exact same thing. Least common multiple. And if they give us 3 numbers, let's take, and they give us 3 numbers and they ask you to find the least common multiple. Okay, we don't have fractions. We're just finding the least common multiple of these 3 numbers. Okay, we can go through, and I picked this one because it's going to have to go out a little bit farther before we find the least common multiple. But I can use my multiplication table still, as long as I look in the row that starts with 2, the row that starts with 5, and the row that starts with 4, and then it becomes very easy. If you have your multiplication table, right now look and see if you can figure out what the least common multiple for 2, 5, and 4 is. Excellent. Now let's see if we were right. This is times 1, times 2. We got 4, we got 10, we got 16. Times 3. We got 6, we got 15, and we got, oh, this is 8, sorry. My bad. 8. And this is 12. Times 4. We have 2 times 4 is 8. Oh, look, we have 8 and 8. But we don't have 8 here. 5 times 4 is 20, and 4 times 4 is 16. 8's the only one we have in both rows, so we're going to have to go, and it's obviously not here, so it can't be 8. It's got to be bigger than 8. Times 5, I get 10, and I'm going to stop doing 20, or I'm going to stop doing 5, because if I keep going, 5 is going to get gigantic, and I don't need it to be that gigantic, because I'm only counting by 2's here and 4's here. But 4 times 5 is 20. So now I have a 20 here and a 20 there. Okay, that would be the least common multiple for 5 and 4. Let's see if 20 shows up in the two multiples. In the multiples of 2. Times 6 is 12. Times 7 is 14. Times 8 is 16. Times 9 is 18. Times 10 is 20. Okay? So now we have a 20 in all 3 rows. We have a 20 here, a 20 here, and a 20 there. That is the first number that appears in all 3 rows. So therefore, our least common multiple in this case is 20. Now you can do that with any set of numbers. Y'all are smart. Y'all have access to your multiplication table in your journal. You have access to your brain. Please do this activity very, very well, because I want to move on to where we're adding and subtracting fractions and having to find the common denominator and practicing that, so when we take our quiz on Friday, you'll be prepared. Thank you for watching.